All right, welcome to Common Ground, the podcast where we put aside political divides and focus on the national security threats that impact all of us. Because whether we like it or not, our adversaries don't care about our political affiliations. I'm Shane McNeil, and as always, I'm joined by my co-hosts.
Amandalynne Davis.
And Logan.
All right. So today we are talking about something that touches on a lot of us here, especially in the DC area. That we are living through it every day. I know that I have been talking to a lot of the junior employees and the especially the probationary people in our agencies that are struggling with a lot of the stuff going on right now, and that is the issue of the potential of mass federal layoffs. We've seen a little bit of it, but we're just starting to see the possibility in the national security arena. And there's some effects of that I think that it's important that we discuss.
I would
So,
agree with that.
it's a topic that is, I know, close to my heart. I know it's close to Logan's.
Mhm.
And there's some issues that come out of this that maybe aren't being talked about as much as I think they need to be. The first off, for us in the Sentinel Research Society, of course, is the counterintelligence risk. That's kind of our bailiwick. Is the issues that come with laying off people who have a top secret security clearance, who have access to classified information, who have these sensitive positions, and all of a sudden they find themselves without a job, or at the very least right now they're sitting there thinking every day, am I gonna have a job tomorrow? And that seems to be the common thought that a lot of people are having, is they're not being told necessarily, am I going to have continued employment? And on top of that, something that is personal to me is the psychological toll that this is having. I know, we tend not to want to talk about psychological issues in this country, but I will admit I have had some extreme anxiety over the last few weeks. And that's something I'm dealing with, and I know that a lot of others are as well. And to that end, we have our favorite doctor back with us today. Dr. Sarah has joined us again, and we are excited to hear her opinions on, what's going on in our country and with our national security apparatus.
So
Yeah, so I
excited.
think that the issue crosses all boundaries. Obviously, the chainsawing doesn't care what party you're registered with or what your thoughts are on the matter. It's more of a just broad stroke with a machete than it is anything that's actually directed. Especially, I think that the problem with a lot of us in national security is that the people that are making these decisions don't know anything about what is happening. If all you have is open source news to realize what is happening in the world, it's a much different picture than what we're dealing with in the Beltway or in national security anywhere. And the danger is, and I would argue against this to anyone that wanted to, some of these folks think they don't have a job skill that's employable on the outside, right? And I hate to even say the outside, that's so structured and indoctrinated, but um you've got a lot of people with a very particular set of skills that they've used for success for many of them for many years. And all of a sudden, they're having to look at possibly out of their control going to the private sector and not thinking they have an option. So that can encourage thoughts that are not just negative, but espionage, let's say, right? It's a very dangerous thing.
You
Yeah.
know, Amandalynne, you're somebody who's, a graduate student in national security right now, and, looking at coming into this field. Logan and I have been doing this for a long time. There's a lot of gray in our beards. You're kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum as from us. What do you see when you look at what's going on right now and you think about a career in national security?
Yeah, asking what I see is quite generous. I feel if anything, I've had a blindfold tied around me and told just walk straight. And it's not working out for me. It's very overwhelming. I find myself going into class and looking to my left and to my right, and is anyone in this field feeling anything close to what I'm feeling? I'm supposed to graduate in a year. I'm trying to break into the field, early career professional. It's so overwhelming. And I can't imagine what it feels like to live in that moment, to actively be living through those layoffs and trying to navigate it. Because I'm sitting here at my desk, scrolling on my phone, getting alerts left and right. And all I can feel like is I'm spiraling. Everything that I wanted to do kind of blowing up in front of me. And I just have to like run between the landmines and hope for the best. It's very overwhelming, it's scary, and I feel like most people don't have anything to say about it because they're just as confused. And in a way, it's nice for me at least. So we're locked arm in arm and we're confused together. Like, what a happy community. I can sit here with you guys and chat about it and get your insight, but it's alarming. It's alarming, and it's hard to sit in class and think, what am I supposed to be doing after this? It's hard to see into the future. Like hindsight will be 2020, I'm sure, but right now it just feels like I'm standing in fog. It's so confusing.
I I appreciate that insight because it's from my, 20 plus years down that road. It's hard to think about, what would I have been thinking when I was still in college, wondering about getting into this field and seeing this situation. And I will say there has been some indications that there might be a light at the end of the tunnel. Some of the layoffs have been temporarily halted by court orders, but there's still that intense feeling of uncertainty that we don't know. We don't know what tomorrow holds. As we're, looking at starting a new week, are we going to see more layoffs just this week? And we don't actually know the answer to that. On top of that, do we have a government shutdown coming? That's scaring a lot of people. And a lot of the legal battles are going to be ongoing for a long time. The employee unions, and some of the states that lean, the opposite, way in the political spectrum are pushing back, but that's not a short term thing that's going to help people understand right now what's going on and what they need to do tomorrow, right? Now I will say it's being framed as a budget issue, that this is about the budget. We tend to see it as a national security issue. I think we are looking at this and saying, look, I get that you guys need to, yeah, our budget is bloated and there is money going to things that maybe it doesn't need to be going to. I think anybody who's ever worked in government has seen money go to places that it didn't need to go to. But we do need to, and I think it's our job in Sentinel to push that narrative that this is also a CI problem, that this is something that we need to be concerned about from the lens of what are we doing to people's psyches when they have access to this information that our adversaries want.
So I think that's two sides, right? I think I'll be the first one to say I think the government's bloated. I think there's a lot of people that aren't doing a lot of work. And well, I shouldn't say a lot. There's some people that are not doing work worthy of their pay, but I think that there's measures that we could implement to fix that. I also have the unique standpoint that for several years my wife said, get out of the pool, and I went to the private sector. And I very quickly made it to a director level position at a Fortune 12 company. So I know that we're marketable, but I'm not going to lie and say I haven't had those moments where I have thought about the fact that I gave up all that to work for my country because I love my country and it's the best job on the planet. And now some guy that doesn't even know what I do and isn't read on and is wanting his bullets on an unsecured network run by a 19-year-old with a relative in the KGB is not the best way to decide if I keep my job or not. Because if I'm a bad guy, I'm just going to filter that information for I work in a sensitive area and start targeting, which is exactly what we've seen even talked about in open source reporting, right? All of the enemies or all the opposition are lining up to get these folks because of these issues that people are uncertain about what Monday brings. How do you do your 5 bullets on something that someone's not even read onto and can't understand? You can't even tell them what you do. So there is anxiety there in that. How do you actually portray the value of what you're doing and the work level that you're performing at when people aren't allowed to know that?
No. Well, and on top of that, we have this, the strain that this is posing, right? Working in this field, we know financial problems have always been a critical aspect of foreign intelligence recruiting. That's what makes you a primary target. Is financial strain, and that if in financial strain doesn't necessarily have to come from actually being fired. And I think that's the thing, is a lot of people are saying, oh well, if we don't actually fire them, then it's not going to be a problem. But we're not only creating potential financial strain by firing people, we're creating a financial strain by people worrying about getting fired, right? Because it's that thing in the back of your head that says, am I going to be able to pay my mortgage this month? Am I going to be able to pay my kids' tuition? Am I going to pay my car bill? Am I going to pay, you don't know. And that unknowing creates a financial strain as well. And you're also creating a potential for a sense of betrayal, if you might, so because, and I've heard people push back on that one and say, well, nobody should feel betrayed by their government because they got fired. But, that's, I think that actually is something that we have to acknowledge that some people are going to feel that way. It would be
Sure.
it would be silly for us not to recognize that
Yeah.
that's a possibility, right? Um,
Absolutely.
it may not be the way that most people see the situation. Most people, maybe 80% of people who get fired or going through this situation are not going to feel betrayed. But 10 to 20% is still a very high number of people when we're talking about potential spies.
Right, absolutely. It's so multifaceted and there's so many different causes, but I'm trying to wrap my head around it all. And it's all a lot to take in, especially whenever you haven't lived the policy process, let's just say. And I've not worked in the government. It it's so complicated, but we're not just letting people go, we're creating a larger threat here. We're creating a counterintelligence threat, is what you're saying.
Exactly. So you take people who were already targets for foreign recruitment, and now you put them in a potentially vulnerable position, and that's a serious problem, right? So we know, like Logan pointed out, we have seen in open source, we've seen in the news, our adversaries are watching this closely, that they are tracking that instability in the US government workforce, right? I mean, there's lots of things that we've seen where we know where they're doing it, like, LinkedIn, things like that.
Well, and I think from a targeting perspective, this makes my mouth water. If I was them, I would be, it's like Christmas morning and there's presents everywhere because, and Shane, you touched on it a little bit. I want to target the ones that are scared, the ones that need to pre-stack security that maybe didn't have the nest egg built up, or maybe they did, but they just don't feel good because once you're out, you don't have access anymore, right? So it's cool. You can tell me methods, SOPs, but if you can get me the active stuff, that's what I want. That's what I'm targeting. So ideally, I'm going to target anyone that I think is vulnerable. I'm going to hit LinkedIn. I'm going to play all these things. I'm going to use TikTok to deliver increased anxiety causing messaging to push that financial stability or distrust or the betrayal feeling, the narrative that I want pushed because I don't want you to feel secure. I don't want you to think that you're going to get a job on the outside. I don't want you to think it's going to be okay because then I want to come in and save you from all that. I'm going to provide for you when your country doesn't love you. I'm the one that takes care of you. And that's how they're going to make these people targets.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a new thing, right? These are the same recruiting tactics we have seen used for a very long time. financial incentives, offering you a well-paying job, and it doesn't even have to pay that much when you don't have a job. If you just
Right.
got, if you just got laid off, or if you're think you might get laid off and you're trying to supplement your income, maybe it doesn't even have to pay that much, right? Another one, networking, right? We all, if you've lived in the DC area and you hit the bars, after work, and what is the, what is the topic, right? We talk about what we do, right? And reaching out to somebody, do you want to, can you do some consulting for me? Can we collaborate on a project, right? And when you're feeling scared, you're worried about whether or not you're gonna have a job, yeah, that's something that you're gonna consider. That's why it was so
Well,
easy, for me to get you guys to work on this project with me, is because you weren't sure that you were gonna have other opportunities coming, so I was able to recruit you to do this project.
wait, Amanda, are you getting
Grayson.
paid?
You're
Well, I wasn't gonna say anything.
getting
Yeah,
paid.
you guys are getting
You're getting
paid
paid
for this? No,
experience.
just kidding.
Uh,
But
you know,
the
I,
challenge
I,
before, the
yeah.
challenge before was finding the target, right? I've got to find the guy with an alcohol problem. I've got to find the guy with a drug problem or a girlfriend or that financial uncertainty. Right now, for the opposition, their target pool is .gov email address, right? I don't have to look hard to find someone. And a lot of government employees are being very outspoken, right or wrong, on social media, which then broadcasts your vulnerability. We had the year of the spy. I think that the repercussions from this is going to be more than they're anticipating, mostly because the people executing have no idea about national security. That's not their thing. They don't know the reality. So it's a dangerous time. And yeah.
I mean, talking about reality, by the way, I'm going to use your phrase there to transition us a little bit, looking at some of the historical cases. The first one that comes to mind on something like this is the reality winner, right? That NSA contractor a while back that leaked classified information to the media out of frustration with the government, right? And that's, by the way, that is something that we need to think about, is because she wasn't a spy in the sense that a lot of us would think about. She was a leaker, and that's a
Mhm.
that's a different type of, it's a similar result, but it's a different type of person that might do something here. And are we?
Or I manipulate you into thinking you're a leaker by pushing those feelings of injustice or betrayal so that you leak, and really I get the information I want either way.
There you
Or I
go.
expose my opposition for the dirty air quotes, you guys can't see it, the air quotes bad things they're doing, right? I want that exposed because maybe I'm tired of my nation being in the news every day for hacking or, our Windows malfunctioning or, multiple soldiers getting arrested. I want to draw that attention back to someone else, which is you. So I'm going to encourage those leakers. I'm going to push those feelings to validate them being okay with committing espionage against their country, which is never acceptable. One of the
Yeah.
guys that was just arrested by the army is an officer. That to me is unacceptable. You are a commissioned officer. It's never acceptable. We'll back up and start there. As an officer, I don't think you have to look back very far in our history to see what used to happen to traitors that were officers.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. It's there are certain groups that we don't generally see committing espionage, certain groups that we don't generally see leaking. I think offhand, like, I don't know that we've ever seen a Marine who committed espionage. I think I
Oh no, there was one.
was
What was
there.
his name? He was Native American. It was Korea. Longtree.
Oh, okay, okay.
But
There you
that's the only one. But
yeah,
that is
but
the only one
yeah.
because the
Okay,
Marines are a
so
cult.
yeah.
But yeah.
So you've got Dr. Sarah laughing here, by the way, because her husband's a Marine officer. So,
Oh, well, just saying.
all right. So I think that's by the way, with her, she is laughing and making some faces at me here. So I think this is a good opportunity to bring Sarah in, and we're gonna transition here. Now that we've covered we've started covering, I don't even know, we haven't covered, but we have started covering the national security side of this. Let's talk about the human side for a minute, because this isn't just about protecting classified information. This is about real people dealing with actual, legitimate, real stress, uncertainty, financial hardship, and for that, we bring on our favorite psychologist, Dr. Sarah Berger.
Thank you, guys.
Sarah, can you introduce yourself again to our
Sure,
audience who
sure.
might not know you?
So I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I actually work with a lot of veterans, a lot of people who work or have worked in the, in the government. And I was laughing earlier because my husband also is a federal employee currently, so I'm trying to, not tap into that piece because that's personal for me. But yeah, I'm happy to talk about the emotional toll that, job loss is for anyone, but especially now with the federal workers, how they might be feeling and how they're impacted for sure.
Why is this situation uniquely stressful?
Well, I think first of all, we are living in currently unprecedented times. So I think that kind of makes things unique to itself. I also think if we're talking specifically about federal employees, these are people who've dedicated, often decades of their lives to the service, to serving their country in this way. A lot of federal, employees are veterans themselves, so they, have always been serving and they just kind of pivot a little bit, right, from how they're serving their country in one way to another. But that being said, it's their identity. They identify in their work, which makes this all the more stressful to them. I also think that, losing a career in a public service, that can feel like a personal failure for a lot of people. Obviously it's out of their control, but because it is part of their identity, they will feel that very deeply. Um, Many are not just losing their jobs right now, but they're also losing security clearances. They're losing these networks of people that they had to depend on. And kind of like I said before, it's a sense of purpose, it's a sense of pride, it's a sense of being, and that's just being stripped from them. So of course, there's going to be mental health blowbacks from that.
With that mental health, like what effects would you expect to see
Yeah.
from this?
So what I'm currently seeing in a lot of clients is increased anxiety, increased depression. For people who have been laid off, they're actually, showing signs of like PTSD symptoms, very similar, because it's so uncertain. A lot of them are feeling angry. A lot of them are feeling betrayed. And a lot of them are also feeling isolated because, it's kind of being loud and proud that, the government is doing this by some, and it's making them feel like they have to shut down because what's happened to them, a lot of people are wanting. And again, that can lead into the depression as well. I'm also seeing a lot of heightened family stress. There's a lot of worried spouses. Again, I'm going to try and check myself with my husband being one of those people. But it's changing household finances, right? I mean, maybe the other partner is having to work more or shift things around on their end because they don't know what's going to happen. They don't have that stability.
I know, yeah, we've thought about that, and do you do the home improvements that maybe you had
Right.
thought about? Do you you had thought about maybe getting a car, you had thought of, or what about all of the people right now whose kids, I mean, we're in the time of year where kids are applying to college.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And are you going to be able to pay for your kid to go to college?
Mhm.
Because are you going to have a job that will cover their tuition?
Mhm.
I can only imagine. I would say I can only imagine, but I have been imagining,
Yeah.
and I'm certain Logan has as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think it's important to acknowledge that it's not just civilians, right? I have a friend that fought very hard to get in to serve his country that happens to be transgender. And we've had some real discussions on this, and how it affects, because he was put on a plane home from deployment to face imminent dismissal because of that, even though he no longer requires medication that has to be refrigerated. He was generous enough to sit down and actually talk through it with me because I had questions, obviously not understanding that. But for someone like that or the other service members that might be looking at similar things, that's a huge thing where you spent so long your life fighting to get in to serve. You don't have any, air quotes again, inconvenient medical condition that requires, a medic to administer a shot or anything like that. He handles all his own stuff, carries his own stuff. So there's none of those reasons to dismiss, but yet now he's on a plane home facing dismissal. And I think it's very important to understand that there are tools out there You know, if you served and you didn't use your GI Bill, you can do that. You can get your housing stipend. I think the blowback on this, the contracting companies are going to make billions more than they normally do because we're gonna accordion this to the point where a lot of shops were already running pretty lean. You're going to take away those contractors or those temp civilian billets, or the shop on the green suit side is going to lose an airman or a soldier or whatever. But then it's going to have to go back the other way because you can't get a lot of blood from a stone. And I think that's the way it's been running for a long time, unfortunately. So there are a lot of things, but I think what Sarah talked about with the isolation, a lot of people, Marines or prior service guys that are girls that went into national security or government employment afterwards, their whole adult life has been in service to their country. And that is a huge thing to wake up one morning and realize is no longer there. So that's a lot to acknowledge, but I think it's important to acknowledge it, to talk about it with your family, and start looking into those resources because you should always be prepared. You never know what's going to happen.
So that's a great transition of what we know it's a problem, right? But what can we do about it? Because
Sure.
there's got to be something that we can do to get through this times. Sarah, what would you recommend to do this?
Sure. Yeah, there are a lot of things that you can do. And I think, the bottom line is trying to focus on the things you can control, right? Like there's so much going on in our day-to-day lives, in this climate that we cannot control. So I would say number one, managing your uncertainty and your anxiety. So focus on what you can control. You could apply to other jobs, you could still be networking, financial planning, like we talked about earlier. Like, yeah, maybe you don't take that trip that you had planned, or you move some money around. Also, under that, I would say create a daily routine. You want to try and prevent feeling directionless. You want to make sure that you're still giving yourself purpose and direction throughout your day. Limiting doom scrolling, right? We don't want to overconsume the negativity. That's just going to make our symptoms way worse. For coping skills, I'd say number two, build some emotional resilience here. Try and reframe the situation. Instead of, I lost my job, try, hey, this is an opportunity to explore new possibilities. This is a harder one, I will say that. But, practicing it will be helpful. And, you can always seek professional support, therapy, counseling, support groups. I know in this area in particular, there are a bunch of support groups being available now for federal workers who are losing their jobs. So tapping into that is going to be really important. Finding that community that you can connect with. This is happening to a lot of people. So tap into those numbers. And lastly, I would just say, for practical steps in moving forward, use the government transition resources, right? There's a lot of things out there. There's security clearance retention programs, federal rehiring pathways, making sure that you're mindful of the recruitment red flags. If it's too good to be true, take a pause. Consult with, trusted peers and friends on that one. And then lastly, I would probably just say reconnect with your network, former colleagues, mentors, professional organizations. You're not going through this alone, even if it's not directly happening to the people around you. Everyone around you does know that this is happening. And if you have a connection with them, really tapping into that, because, at the end of the day, I think human nature, we do want to support one another, and leaning into that can really help your mental health.
Sarah, I love that you're focusing on keeping a sense of control because I think that's the hardest part for a lot of people, feeling they have no say in what's happening next.
Right, absolutely. And the truth is, while you can't control government decisions, you can control how you respond to them, right? So that mind shift makes all the difference sometimes.
So basically, the key takeaway here is don't spiral,
Mhm.
don't isolate,
Mhm.
don't take the first high paying job offer from a consulting firm in Shanghai.
Exactly.
All right.
Not worth the risk.
Yeah.
That's really solid advice, though. Thank you for that. Even as someone that's not currently in the field, I feel like I could take that and walk away feeling a little bit better about even getting those notifications on my phone. Maybe I just put on do not disturb for a good 30, take a breather.
I think the biggest thing is you can't control it either way. So just go
Right.
live your life. Go outside, go to the gym, go find a hobby, get out and do something.
Touch some grass.
do something. Yeah,
See
go
the
out.
sun, get some
There's
vitamin D.
yeah, there's a lot of people have vitamin D deficiencies in national security because there's no windows. Go
Yeah.
outside and discover that bright ball in the skies. Kind of makes you feel good sometimes. It's good for you. I
Yeah,
promise.
that is an awesome, especially we're coming up on the time of year in DC where, soon we'll have the cherry blossoms coming out. We have,
Mhm.
We just had
that
daylight savings.
we had just had daylight savings, so I woke up this morning trying to figure out what time it was.
Daylight theft.
Um,
Yeah.
by the way, for anybody who's trying to figure out when we're recording this, we just told you when we're recording this episode. All right.
Yeah.
Um,
But there's a lot to do, like you said, right? There's, especially in our area, there's tons of places to eat. There's tons of things to see. There's, books you can read. You can go hike to the old OSS training sites. When I worked for GoRuck for a while, we did some events where we took people out and showed them like historic sites and stuff like that. There's a ton of things to do.
yeah.
And there's a lot of resources. So if you're scared, go look. But, you know,
Also a
never
vibrant
hurts.
community though. I mean, like I said
Yeah,
earlier, we're all in it together.
right.
Link up arms and go get dinner.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's one of the, by the way, for all of us, we at IWP and Sentinel, we're all at IWP together, and we have that sense of community that maybe other people don't. So a little plug for our school there, that gives a little bit of hope in this trying time. So some final thoughts here is you know we need to recognize these are not just these layoffs aren't just a financial problem. That this is a counterintelligence issue, which is why we're here talking about it, right? The government needs to do a better job supporting people who potentially pose a risk to national security. They need to take that into account and think about what risks are they potentially creating in the way that this is being done. And on top of that, people need to take steps to protect their mental health and their security, right? Because mental health is an important factor in national security, not in the way that we used to treat it, where we're not going to hire you because of your mental health, but that we need to make sure that we are accepting that mental health is real, that mental health is health, and that is a factor in national security. So we talked previously in our last episode, and then we have this special episode that we are dropping. But the next episode is going to be about how China and Russia use tech to manipulate your life. We'll be diving into the digital battlefield, how adversaries use social media and disinformation and AI-driven influence campaigns to shape public perception and even alter election. And we hope that you guys will join us for that episode. All right, that's it for today's episode of Common Ground. If you found this discussion insightful, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We're here every other week breaking down the national security threats that impact all of us, no matter where you stand politically.
And if you liked what you heard, leave us a review. It helps more people find the show and join the conversation. Plus, we promise to read every single one, unless, of course, it's written by a bot from Beijing or a Winnie the Pooh costume.
You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Blue Sky for updates, behind the scenes content, and more ways to stay informed. Got a topic you want us to cover? Let us know. We love hearing from our listeners.
And remember, national security isn't left or right, it's about all of us. Until next time, let's find some common ground.